All right, it is 3:00 Pacific time, 6:00 Eastern time. Taping this right after Nets Bucks game 4. Ryen Russillo is here. Man, how much can change over the course of the weekend? I watched game 3 and I thought, Nets gave it away. They're fine. That's about as dumb of a game as they're going to lose. They easily could have won 9 different times. They played terribly. They still almost won. And I'm not sure what Milwaukee has for answers. Going to game 4, the Nets are up 34-25, have all the momentum. Shamit Face commits a foul on Middleton, 4-point play. And it opens the floodgates. Bucks go on a 19-2 run. Kyrie sprains his ankle during the run. And the entire series shifts. And now Kyrie is out. We have no idea when Harden's coming back. And you saw what the Nets looked like as a one-man team. Russillo, it's overreaction Sunday. Did the Bucks flip this series?
Yeah, I mean, they did, because now we don't know about the Kyrie part. But I'll tell you, like, this doesn't happen very often, because I've felt like Milwaukee, you look at them, you're like, all right, I like them. Look at all the size, look at all this stuff. Those first 2 games are so bad. In game 3, even though they won it, Bill, I felt worse about them. I go, this has, like, there's a version of this breakdown, which I still will probably do and perhaps regret, because the Bucks could end up winning this series if it's just Durant. But there are fundamental problems that this team has, with Giannis being the initiator on so many things. And Middleton was bad for 2 games. Drew Holiday couldn't do anything for like 3 games. He was a little better. They shot it better. And it felt like once Kyrie went down, it was 44-40, 5:42 left in the second quarter. It felt like the Nets just emotionally were like in shock. They were very flat for a long period of time. And then I think Milwaukee actually kind of matched their lack of emotion, but it was just they had more options. And I thought Tucker was terrific on Durant. They're very physical with him.
And Milwaukee made threes, which they did not do in the first 3 games. It was a weird energy game from Durant. And I think this is a good topic to hit for this specific game. And we can go into what this means. I'm sure there's going to be stuff that comes out as we're doing this pod about how hurt Kyrie is, things like that. But Durant, for I think somebody who's one of the best 15 players ever, who I think is the best player in the league right now, the best two-way guy. If I'm starting a team just for 4 rounds and I can have anyone in the league and I'm trying to win the title, he's my first pick. And yet the way Tucker was defending him and the physicality and the tricks he was doing and how he was just like Rich Kleiman sarcastically tweeted, PJ Tucker has 13 fouls here in the third quarter, but he really was like roughing him up. And I'm not making excuses for KD because I thought it took him out of it. I just think it's fascinating that he doesn't get officiated sometimes like he's one of the best players of all time, because I promise you, if somebody tried to defend LeBron like that, they would be calling the fouls. And this has been a theme with KD's career. You can get physical with him. The Warriors did it in 2016. And we've seen KD get frustrated. He starts looking at the refs. This is kind of the blueprint for how to defend him. Unfortunately, for the league, there's not that many guys who could do this, but Tucker knows it. He was playing all the tricks. He was doing the Raja Bell, Bruce Bowen. He was doing the playbook, greeting him 2/3 of the way up the court in his way, jostling him, pushing him, always like in his vicinity, bugging him. And it worked. But my question for you is, does Kevin Durant get treated like a superstar? Because it did not seem like it in this game.
There are other guys that get calls because their primary approach to basketball is trying to get calls. And those are usually guys I don't love watching. And I would say even Steph started doing it a little bit more this year than he's ever done it before. Yeah. It's like, all right, let's just go ahead and do it. But I think when you're 7-1, it just gets old. Like, you don't want to keep doing it. And the biggest thing with Durant when it's right is, he gets that screen and he kind of comes into mid-range and it's just, you're scrambling a bit. You don't really know. I thought they got good looks in game 3. Others disagree. I thought they just didn't shoot it very well. And I thought whenever it was kind of that handoff to him trying to settle into that mid-range pull-up jumper deal, Tucker was just on him the whole time, like riding him. So, yeah, I think he got fouled. I don't think the Nets would have won had they called more of these fouls. But you have to be committed to exaggerating contact if you're going to be one of those guys. Because even if you get it, like, the thing that drives me crazy is, like, it'll be obvious that it was a bad call. And you'd think, like, all right, the ref's not going to give you the benefit of the doubt the next couple times you do it. They just keep making the call for you. So I think for Durant, he was falling like later in the action. You know what I mean? Like, how many times did we see him sitting his ass on baseline, like looking up as everybody is in transition going the other way? It's like he needs to sell that earlier, but I just don't. I think it can get a little exhausting doing that over and over again, trying to sell calls. But look, it's not what they lost. I thought once Irving went down, Bucks hit shots. Tucker, who had 9 points in the first 3 games total, couldn't hit a three. He hits threes. Drew, who's been invisible for 3 games, he gets it going. And then Giannis, who I know we're going to talk about here, and we should, kind of like as the core of this. I mean, these are not the reasons why Milwaukee won. Milwaukee won for all the things I just said, not because of the Durant stuff.
Well, Milwaukee won because of that 19-2 run when they were really physical with Durant, and it worked. They were going to the line. Giannis was aggressively going to the basket and doing his stuff. And I thought Middleton, even though his stats won't really show it, he had a knack for making shots when you could feel the momentum starting to drift the other way. Actually, I thought he played a good two-way game. The Durant thing, though, you're right. He's kind of one of the most authentic players we have. Like he is a ball don't lie kind of, like he does his thing. If he gets the calls, he gets them. If he doesn't get them, he doesn't get them. But he's not going to do the I shoot my jumper and I flail my arms out, or I'm going to pretend I'm going to kick my legs out on this three and hope I drew contact, stuff like that. Both him and Kyrie don't really operate that way. There's like a purity to how they play the game. So when they feel like the refs aren't kind of respecting that purity, like today, I do think Durant loses it a little bit. Like I think he lost his composure tail end of the second and definitely in the third quarter for the first 6 minutes during a point when the Nets didn't really have anybody else but him, right? And that had to be like one-man show Durant. You could feel this happen in 2016 too, those last 3 Warriors games, which we broke down on a Book of Basketball pod, where when it really started to get skittish and the Warriors kept pushing the energy up and up and up, like Durant sometimes can get discombobulated by it. And I felt like it happened today. I actually think if he had played a great game, I think they could have beaten the Bucks even with just him. But he just, I mean, they had at one point, like halfway through the third quarter, they had 52 points. They had 34 with like 8 minutes left in the second. Like they scored 18 points for like a period and a half. They missed, after Kyrie went out, they missed 10 straight threes. And I just thought they fell apart. And I thought they fell apart emotionally too. You're right. Their energy died.
Yeah, from Kyrie being out at 44-40, that turned into 87-73. They were 12 of 32 overall, 0 from 10 from 3 with 8 turnovers. So even with the physical stuff on PJ, a bunch of those other guys were terrible. Like James had some moments. That alley-oop he went to throw to Blake were literally James. I don't even think he knew what he was doing. No one else knew what the plan was. He didn't. Joe Harris missed everything early. And all of a sudden when you can just load up on Durant and you're never helping off of some of those other guys, like the reason why Nick Claxton and Brown and the rest of these dudes have looked good is because there are always 2 horrifying offensive players out there. So now all of a sudden there's one. And I also think there's just a human nature element too. We saw it in game 3 with the Clippers and Jazz. When the team is desperate and they're going to play you a little bit more physical, and that's certainly what happened with some of those hard doubles on Mitchell, the way they came up to defend Ingles at the very start of the game. You're like, oh, okay. And I think it can take you sometimes. I know this sounds ridiculous, but there are moments in games where you can just tell if Durant goes back and watches the tape, he'll be pissed at himself because he's going to go, you know what? I didn't match their intensity. Right. I wasn't ready for it. And it happens. It happens all the time. Even with the best players, you can see over the course of a game where you don't adjust to match the other team. And then you regret it for like the next 48 hours and you come out with a plan and ready for it.
I thought Blake matched it. I think KD was there, at least for a little while, and Kyrie was there. I don't know what happened to Joe Harris in this series, but he was the biggest reason they lost game 3, I thought. He was 1 for 11 in that game. And on top of that, had a couple defensive lapses and just looks overmatched from an athleticism standpoint. And this is a guy that, when you get into the dregs of the season and they start coming up with the dumb topics for pods or TV shows, like, is Joe Harris the 4th All-Star on this team? And it's like, no, he's actually not. He's in a really good spot with playing with 3 All-Stars. And I think when they really needed him to go toe-to-toe with Middleton, he had a lot of trouble. You mentioned Mike James. Mike James, who I was going to have as a topic before he put up that stink bomb, like, could we add him to the list of guys who could conceivably score 20 points a game on a 15 and 67 team? Do you think Mike James could score 20 points a game on a bad team?
Yeah, I mean, he's actually, he's the real deal offensively. He is, but
he wasn't today, though, is my point.
No,
he was really awful today, and they needed him.
I've also seen moments with him with the Nets where he's all about his deal, which I think he's had to be to survive. But
Yep.
I know there was one game, I still think it was towards the end of the regular season, where it was a decent game and Nash like yanked him in a spot where you wouldn't normally yank him, and he was like, "All right, I'm getting you out of here." Now I was just watching it, so I don't know exactly what happened after the fact.
And Shamet was another one who did not show up in either of these games, and it doesn't seem like they have a lot of confidence in Shamet, which is tough because that was that three-way trade where I think the Nets were the one that gave up their first, right? And that was a pick that is in the Sadiq Bey kind of range, but if it just doesn't seem like they trust him. And I thought it was weird because in the two home games, they were playing their bench. Like they were playing guys like Tyler Johnson. They were getting a lot of energy. And then Nash only went 8 guys in the third game and I don't think Tyler Johnson played, and he just like tightened the rotation, did that whole thing. And then in the game today, I actually thought that would have been a really important Tyler Johnson 5-minute stretch post Kyrie, because at least he can, he'll pick up the other point guard full court. Like he'll have some energy, he'll have some intensity, but they just didn't play him at all. And they kind of tried to have Mike James as the Kyrie replacement, which I thought was weird. But I have to admit, coming into the second half, I thought it was set for the magical KD ESPN Classic game. I thought he was going to have, I really thought he was going to have like 28 points in the second half and bring them back and do it. But it just wasn't his day. And I think these last 2 games, they've thrown him off. Like he hasn't shot well and he's looked frustrated, and he's had some very un-KD-like plays, which we're going to do our top 40s later. And I don't think it's going to affect my top 40, but I don't know. It's like, think about, could Luka have survived for 3 quarters? When you just think about one-man shows, I thought Durant's one-man show game was going to show up in that second half. It did not.
I thought everybody else was dead. I thought there were some horrible possessions where they're just looking at each other. And then there was like another run there before they went to the benches where Jeff Green just threw it away to somebody else. There were times where they got stuck and there was zero spacing, and then they would be looking back at KD. So I thought they were all a mess. I thought emotionally they were completely destroyed. And I just think it was a bad half plus of basketball after losing another really special player in Kyrie. So I don't know where you had. I mean, look, we can watch games differently and all that kind of stuff. I'm surprised that you had this anticipation for this unbelievable KD moment, which would have been a major 180 from where they seem to be intensity wise.
He ended up with 16 in the third quarter, which it didn't feel like it was happening. I was wondering, so this ties into another question I had, and this was even before game 4. I was going to ask you this. I just don't think Harden's close to coming back. And this is a tea leaf thing. This is like through the grapevine kind of stuff. I don't think he's close. And I wonder, like, do the Nets know he's not close to coming back? Or if he comes back, he'd be 70%, not 100%. But when Kyrie goes down, he's obviously really hurt. And the Nets as a team, they look at that and they're like, holy shit. Like if they know Harden isn't necessarily going to be back in the next couple games, and then you have Kyrie with this like legit ankle sprain, that was a bad one. And you just go, holy shit. Like this could now be a best of 3, and we're down to 1 star. And they like, you used I don't know, you didn't say shell shock before, but there was like a small shell shocking that you could feel for that half hour, right?
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear. You could see it, and they played like crap.
Yeah.
And then it was just KD fix everything. And, this is, I think, what's really delicate about this series. Okay. If there's no Kyrie and there's no Harden, as you're alluding to, and the Bucks win this, the result, I think, will trick us into thinking the Bucks are something that they're not. And during game 3, even when the Bucks won it, and I don't know if you want to go here yet, but I'm watching Giannis and I'm going, why do you expect this to be different in any of these playoff series against good teams? This is only like the 3rd year of evidence that you can find a way to slow him down. Now he's not making any free throws. Zach Lowe did a really good piece kind of looking at some of the second spectrum possessions where, some of the ISO stuff that he's running is like 19 ISOs a game. He's missing basically all of his threes. And I'm thinking about him as a top 10 player, which he certainly is. But then I compare him to the rest of the top 10 guys. I'm like, is he the only one that kind of can't keep you honest? Is he the only one that becomes so one-dimensional offensively that it's easy to shut down? And Blake, it's kind of like when a pitcher misses a spot and then we show the replay and that's a home run. It's like, oh, look where the catcher was set up and then boom. It's like, you know what? Sometimes guys are going to miss spots and get crushed, and other times they're going to miss spots and it's still a strike. Like, and with Blake, sometimes he's going to get eaten up by Giannis, but I think he held his own on a lot of those drives where when Blake was in there. And it led to a bigger deal of me looking at Giannis going, I defend him. I like his approach. I like that he's intense. I like that it seems like he cares, Bill. But I'm also open to the idea that he may be this incredibly flawed superstar. And that's the way it felt going through game 3. And now they might get through the series. And I don't know if it actually really changes any of these thoughts that I've had. I'm open to discuss being wrong about it. I think I've been very pro Giannis for this run of 3 years and being like, we'll see what happens. But I also think there's just some reality of watching it play out over and over and over again where you go, maybe he's just not that guy. Maybe he's the regular season guy. Assess.
Yeah, it reminds me of, when some of the comedy actors try to do a drama, and it's like,
I was not expecting this. I mean, I can't wait.
It's like Will Ferrell, as you've never seen him before, as a divorced dad who's battling alcoholism. By the way, that movie, he didn't make that movie. I'm just saying, you're kind of like, I just want Will Ferrell to be the Little League coach who's, screaming at everybody and just being goofy. Like that's the Will Ferrell I like. With Giannis, I just like the Giannis who's in transition, coming off defensive rebounds, and he's this unstoppable force of nature, or he's the guy who's around the rim finishing plays alley-oop. When he's Giannis from 25 feet, now he's Will Ferrell in the dramedy as the alcoholic father going through the divorce. And it's just like, this is not how we should be using him. He's not LeBron. He's not Luka. Like we've said it a million times. See, I think he's a center, and I think he's miscast with a lot of this stuff. And maybe there shouldn't be centers anymore. You should argue, like, if you have a 7-foot athlete like that. But we've seen guys like Embiid and Jokic and low post guys use these drop steps and these little jump hooks and different moves and pull second defenders, which opens the court for everybody else. And I just, watching this for multiple years, I just don't understand how they use them. Zach, one of the revelations in Zach's piece today, which was excellent, it was on ESPN.com if you want to go read it, was when they use him as a screener.
When he's the roll man, yeah.
When he's the roll man,
it's terrible.
The stats are even worse. He's like, what was it, like 0.84 per possession?
It was awful. Yeah.
I would have thought, just knowing nothing, like being like, oh man, I don't understand why they don't run Drew and Giannis pick and roll. That should be unstoppable. And there's overwhelming statistical evidence that it's really stoppable because everybody just backs down and they give Giannis this 15 to 24 foot cushion, which leads me to my point. Like, if Shaq was being used like this and Shaq was just always 25 feet from the basket, Shaq would have been guarded this way, right? Because Giannis is such an unbelievable athlete, you don't think of him as a traditional center, but I just think he is. Now, he had a great game today. It was 34 points, but that was a game. It was discombobulated. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of, long rebounds or turnovers, and he was in transition a lot, which is when he looks great. But that's, as we know in the playoffs, you don't get that for 4 straight rounds. You just don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how people will react to that, but I'm sitting here and I'm counting this as like the 3rd playoff year where I felt like, all right, they made an adjustment. Toronto's smart. They're up 2-0. They lost 4 straight. Like, that's not the worst thing to ever happen. And then last year, you're like, that's a disaster. But is it fluky because of the bubble? And then, the shooting numbers were atrocious in the first round against Miami, but we realized Miami's incredibly limited. And then when you look at some of the possessional stuff, you're like, okay, that's bad. And I know he was going to be great today. Like, look, Giannis could still get 40 in one of these games here. It's certainly a possibility, but I have to be honest in that, like, a lot of my note taking and the stuff I was looking up after game 3, I go, all right, so he keeps taking threes and he misses. He keeps missing all of his free throws.
Van Gundy was like grunting.
Two games in a row. He did it again on one today where he was like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And I don't think I'm being unfair knowing that he's fully capable of having some huge game, but I don't know if he can carry you consistently enough, because when he does get slowed down by the wall, he can be really slow in his decision. There's a couple of possessions today where I thought the broadcast was like giving him too much credit. They're like, oh, that was great. It's like, no, he kind of just got stuck and then threw it to the guy behind him. And then the guy made the shot. A couple times where it was with Drew, where I think it was a quicker decision on the pass, but I think he can be really slow on his decisions. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I was at. Because I mean, if you look at all the other top 10 players, and he's certainly one of those, like I would say Embiid's the only other one that you wouldn't call a shooter, but whether it's LeBron, Harden, certainly Curry, Doncic, Kawhi, Joker, Dame, and I'm just kind of doing this off the top of my head. He's in that group, but he's probably the only one that you're begging to shoot.